Close your eyes and imagine a morning 10,000 years ago. There is no clock, no phone, no glowing screen counting down the minutes, no buzzing, no snooze button, no second alarm as backup. There is only darkness, the cold, and the quiet breathing of your family asleep beside you. And yet, somehow, you need to be awake before the sun clears the hills, because the animals you're hunting move at dawn, and if you sleep too long, your family doesn't eat. So here's a question almost nobody ever stops to ask. How did ancient humans wake up on time, thousands of years before the alarm clock was even a dream? The answer is stranger and far more clever than you'd ever guess. Because for the vast majority of human history, waking up wasn't a battle against a machine screaming in your ear. It was something woven into your body, your sky, and the world around you. And once you understand how they did it, you'll realize that we may have actually forgotten something they knew. Let's start with the oldest alarm clock of all, the one you were literally born with. Deep inside your brain sits a tiny cluster of cells, no bigger than a grain of rice. Scientists call it your circadian clock, your internal body clock. And here's the incredible part. It doesn't need light, sound, or any outside signal to work. It runs on its own, keeping a rhythm roughly 24 hours long, tuned over millions of years to the spin of the Earth itself. Ancient humans didn't know this cluster of cells existed, but they lived by it perfectly because they had no choice. Think about what a night was actually like back then. When the sun went down, the world didn't just get dim, it became truly, absolutely dark. No streetlights, no lamps in the window. Fire was precious and dangerous to keep burning all night. So when darkness fell, there was very little to do but sleep. And if you fall asleep as soon as it gets dark, around 7 or 8 in the evening, then waking at the first light of dawn isn't painful at all. Your body has already had a full night's rest. You wake up not because something forces you, but because you're simply finished sleeping. This is the secret that makes the whole mystery dissolve. Ancient humans didn't struggle to wake up early because they weren't fighting their bodies the way we do. They went to sleep with the sun and rose with the sun, and their internal clock kept them locked to that rhythm like a tide following the moon. But it gets even more fascinating because the way they slept was completely different from the way you sleep tonight. For most of human history, people didn't sleep in one long block of 8 hours. Historians who studied ancient and medieval writings, old diaries, court records, and letters found something we've almost entirely forgotten. People slept in 2 separate parts, and they had names for them, the first sleep and the second sleep. You would drift off not long after dark, sleep deeply for about 4 hours, and then, completely naturally, wake up in the dead of night. And this waking wasn't a problem. It wasn't insomnia. For an hour or so, people would simply exist in the quiet dark. They'd tend the fire, murmur to each other, pray, think, or step outside to look at the stars. Then they'd lie back down and fall into the second sleep until morning. To an ancient human, the middle of the night was a gentle, familiar place. The idea that you'd want a device to violently rip you out of sleep at one exact moment would have seemed bizarre, even cruel. Their nights breathed in and out on their own. Now, of course, the sun and the body clock worked beautifully for people whose lives followed the rhythm of daylight. But not everyone could rely purely on instinct. As civilizations grew, some people needed to wake at a specific hour, for reasons the sun alone couldn't guarantee. And this is where ancient humans became astonishingly inventive. Consider the rooster, the most ancient alarm clock that still crows in villages today. Roosters don't crow at dawn because they see the light. They crow because they have their own internal clock, and it actually anticipates the sunrise before the sky brightens at all. Ancient farmers across the entire world figured this out and built their mornings around it. For thousands of years, that sharp cry cutting through the dark was the signal that started the human day. The rooster became so tied to the morning that people carved it onto towers and rooftops as the very symbol of dawn. But the truly clever solutions came when ancient people tried to capture time itself and turn it into sound. Travel back to ancient Greece, more than 2,000 years ago. The philosopher Plato, the great teacher who shaped Western thought, is said to have owned one of the first alarm clocks in history. It was built from a water clock, a device that measured time by letting water drip slowly and steadily from one container into another. Plato, or the clever mind who built it for him, added a brilliant twist. When the water rose to a certain level, it suddenly forced trapped air through a narrow pipe, producing a loud, sharp whistle, like a kettle screaming. Picture it, an alarm clock powered by nothing but dripping water, whistling awake the students of ancient Athens before the sun had risen. Some say Plato used it to make sure he woke early enough for his studies. His device had no gears, no electricity, no springs, just water, air, and a very old human desire to not oversleep. The ancient Chinese found a completely different path. They invented candle clocks, candles marked with evenly spaced lines, each one representing an hour that passed as the flame ate its way down. But then came the ingenious part. They would press small metal balls into the soft wax at a chosen mark. As the candle slowly burned down and the flame reached that point, the wax around the metal melted, and the balls dropped and clattered onto a metal tray waiting below. A sudden ringing crash in the dark, an alarm made of fire and falling metal, time to wake you at whatever hour you'd chosen the night before. The ancient Egyptians, master builders and sky watchers, read time differently. During the day, they tracked the sun with shadow clocks and obelisks, watching a shadow crawl across the ground to tell them the hour. At night, when the sun was gone, they turned their eyes upward and read the slow march of the stars across the sky, using the rising of certain star groups to know how deep into the night they had traveled. For temple priests who had to perform sacred rituals at precise moments, the stars themselves became the great clock overhead, silent, reliable, and impossibly old. And then there were the water clocks of the temples, the ringing of the first great bells, and later, the monasteries, where holy communities had to rise in the middle of the pitch-black night to pray, sometimes several times before morning. Missing a prayer was unthinkable, so they became obsessed with measuring the hours of the night, and their bells rang out across the dark to wake everyone together at once. In fact, our very word clock comes from an old word meaning bell, because the first mechanical clocks weren't built to be looked at. They were built to be heard, to ring the hour so an entire community would wake as one. So step back and look at what these ancient people actually had. They had the sun sliding up over the horizon. They had the rooster's cry cutting the darkness. They had water dripping into whistles, stars wheeling overhead, metal balls falling from burning candles, and bells echoing through the night. And underneath all of it, quietly running in every single person, they had that ancient clock buried in the brain, tuned to the turning of the earth. Here's the part that should give you pause. In many ways, ancient humans were better at waking than we are. They didn't wake up exhausted, dragged out of deep sleep by a screaming device, reaching desperately for a snooze button. They woke gently, in tune with the light, their bodies finishing sleep on their own. We invented the perfect alarm clock, and in doing so, we may have broken the natural rhythm that kept humans rested for 100,000 years. We stayed up hours past dark under artificial light. We crushed our sleep into one rigid block. We handed the job of waking to a machine and slowly forgot the quiet signals our ancestors trusted completely. So think about your own morning now. That phone, glowing on your nightstand, ready to blast you awake, is the final descendant of a long, strange story. Dripping water in the halls of ancient Athens, stars turning above Egyptian temples, metal balls falling from Chinese candles, bells ringing through the dark, a rooster crowing at the first hint of dawn. Every one of them was an answer to the same quiet question that follows every human to bed. How do I trust that I'll wake up in time? For almost all of human history, the answer was never a machine. It was the sun on the horizon. It was a bird with a clock in its chest. It was the stars, the fire, the falling of a metal ball, and most of all, it was the ancient clock ticking silently inside your own body, the very same one ticking inside you right now, tonight, as you sleep. The ancients never needed an alarm to trust the morning would come. Maybe the real question isn't how they woke up without one. Maybe it's why we ever stopped trusting that we could.